Yeah, so this talk I'm going to be, there's going to be some Bible in it, don't worry. But a lot of this is my other hat, which is, people may not know about, the second PhD, which I'm currently a candidate for. Let me tell you, ABD is less threatening once you already have one. But, so this is going to be dealing with a little bit of philosophical and cultural analysis in addition to Scripture. And the starting point for this, the starting point for my thinking, which has been going on for a few years now, of which this is a part, is a conversation I was having with a well-known, in Europe, post-Marxist sociologist. We were talking about Simone Weil's work, and she asked me, what does Christianity have to say about alienation? If you think that's a weird starting point, buckle up, because it may be a little weird. I'm probably known now, especially after recently released internet videos, for going into some maybe odd circles to try to talk about the Church of the Faith. That's something I do a lot. But the other side of that is that some of these circles I go into have, I think, interesting things to say, or at least questions to ask of the church and of the faith that maybe we don't think about as much, right? And so when she asked that question, what does the church have to say about alienation, she meant something very specific by alienation. And so I know from this afternoon that people love quotes from Karl Marx. So I'm going to give you one. And this is a somewhat well-known quote, but he's really talking about the core of what this concept of alienation means. And that's when he said, all that is solid melts into air, all that is holy is profaned, and man is at last compelled to face with sober senses his real conditions of life and his relations with his kind. And what he's talking about is the end result of a process which he sees tied solely to capitalism, of course, but that is not tied, I think, solely to capitalism, but does involve it, in which we as human beings have been gradually alienated from one thing after another. To put a header on it, we would say relationships between people get replaced with relationships between people and things. And so if you think about how Marx is thinking about it, he's thinking about it in terms of commodification. Things are turned into commodities. And when something is turned into a commodity, it is separated from both the person who creates it, who makes it, who builds it, right? And from whoever ends up owning it in a certain way. If I am a craftsman and I make a chair, I now have a chair that I made. I can sell it, I can keep it, I can give it to someone. But if I give it to someone or I sell it to someone, then for the rest of that person's life, they can point at it and say, that is the chair that Father Stephen made me. That is the chair that Father Stephen gave me. I got that chair from Father Stephen. And so that chair is part of a relationship between me and that person. Or, right, if I inherit the chair from my grandfather, there is a relationship between me and my father and my grandfather, this familial relation that this object is a part of. If I go to Walmart and buy a chair, there is no relationship established between me and Walmart, or any of the Walmart employees, or anyone at the chair factory, or anyone at the, right? So this is the kind of example that Marx has in mind. But we can go further, right? We can think about the way in which religion has been commodified in American life now. Religion is something that is bought and sold now. Recently, a certain individual who I won't name, but who is one of the most prominent evangelical voices on the internet, in an interview, and this is clipped, he said it out loud, He said, I have thousands of followers, X number of tens of thousands on Twitter, on Instagram. How do I monetize these people? Right? This is an evangelical religious leader saying it out loud. Okay? So religion has become something bought and sold. It is this thing, this product. And I find the brand that I like, and I consume it as I see fit. And if I decide I don't like it anymore, I move to another brand. Right? Now, in our current culture, sexuality has been commodified. They found a way to buy and sell that. I'm not talking about prostitution. When I was a teenager, and I'm not that old, it was considered a real societal problem that teenagers were having sex. We are now literally in an age where it is considered a problem that teenagers are not having sex. At least not with each other. Right? Because you can't buy and sell that. Right? You can buy and sell pornography on the internet. Right? But notice the alienation there. If I'm hearing a confession from a teenager or a young adult who has a girlfriend or a fiance and they went a little too far on a Friday night, that's one kind of issue to deal with in confession. I don't deal with that much in confession anymore. What I deal with is people whose entire sexual experience has been just them in front of a screen. No other, it's not part of any relationship with any other human being. It's with a thing, an image, right? A computer. So this is the problem of alienation that she was asking me about. What does Christianity have to say about this? What do we have to offer in the face of this? And all of this has been happening over the last few decades. And of course, everything that happened in 2020 accelerated it. As people were forced into greater isolation. Right? As churches all started going online, and some of them never came back to in-person. Right? To having people in the same room. And so I want to talk about 3 ways in which Orthodox Christianity in particular represents an answer to this in ways that commodified religion sort of can't. And the way this relates to the topic of this event, and my topic is, Orthodox Christianity does indeed speak to the human heart, but that is not purely about our interior life. In the sense that you cannot have a healthy interior life without having a healthy external life in relationship with other people. And this is not just, well, for some reason you can't have one without the other. It's like what St. John teaches us in his first epistle. The reason you can't love God and not love your neighbor is that loving your neighbor is loving God. That is how we love God. And so in the same way, our interior life will only ever be as healthy as our external life of relationship in community is. These go together fundamentally. You cannot be isolated and alienated, yet spiritually healthy off by ourselves. It's not possible. So in talking about these 3 ways in which I think Orthodox Christianity uniquely addresses this, I'm going to talk about a couple other things. And they may not seem immediately related, but give me a second. Give me time. The first one of these is something called Universe 25. I wager most of you have never heard of this. This was an experiment done on mice. That's why you haven't heard about it, right? But it was an experiment, part of a series of experiments done by a guy named John B. Calhoun, good American Southern name, who, Universe 25 was the 25th experiment. And he calls these experiments universes because he set up these habitats for mouse populations. And what he was primarily aiming at was trying to understand the effects of overpopulation. This was in the late 50s and 60s when everyone was concerned about overpopulation. But it revealed a bunch of other interesting things. So Universe 25, his idea was, I'm going to create mouse utopia. Right? I am going to create a universe for these mice where there's an abundance of everything. All the food, all the water they could want, right? Everything they need to thrive, reproduce. And at the end of the second year of the experiment, the population had boomed. At the end of the fourth year of the experiment, the last mouse died. Even though they theoretically had everything they needed. What it revealed was there are some things that living creatures, including humans, need that were not actually being provided. So the first one that they noticed is that in normal mouse behavior, male mice will challenge each other. They will fight. And they will fight basically to gain the attention of female mice and to be able to reproduce. And the mouse who loses, right, the mouse who loses and who's therefore sort of shamed, leaves the area, leaves that group of mice, and goes off somewhere else to begin again. While the one who wins is then able to mate, reproduce, go on with his life. Well, in Universe 25, there was no place to go. There was no place for that mouse who lost to leave and start again. He was stuck, bearing his shame. And over the course of those years of the experiment, those mice that had to live with their shame and who couldn't begin again became violent. They would attack other mice. They would kill the young of other mice. They began to act out in all these ways because there was no hope for them. There was no way to change and start over. And this is directly related to the alienation problem. Folks here may not have read it, but there's a book that Mark Fisher published called Capitalist Realism. And what he was doing was he was dumping a big bucket of ice water on the would-be socialists of the early 2000s. Because despite what had happened in already actually existing socialism, there were still people in the late 90s and in the 2000s who said, oh, well, they just didn't do it right. Right? We could still do that. We could still make this work. We could still make this happen. We're going to do it right this time. Everything will be fine. And Mark Fisher said, guys, this isn't going to happen. Right? That's why it's called capitalist realism. And he used as evidence the fact that, and this is the most famous quote from the book, it's easier for us to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And he was pointing to, like in popular media, we have The Walking Dead. We can imagine a zombie apocalypse, right? We can imagine an environmental collapse. We can imagine all of these things involving the end of the world. But people by the 2000s were unable to imagine this world somehow getting better for them. that their working life, their family life, that could get better. They could not imagine. But we could imagine that this whole thing would just fall apart and it would be every man for himself. And that shows this same kind of despair. Living in a world where already in the aughts, unfortunately, Mark Fisher took his own life not that long after writing the book. That in this world where already in the aughts, the internet was a thing, where anything you've ever said or done can follow you forever, where everyone is concerned about holding everyone else accountable for everything they've ever done, and there's no forgetting. Within that alienated world, there is no fresh start. There is no new start. There is no dyeing your hair and going to the other end of the country and beginning a new life. It doesn't happen anymore. I shouldn't have to go too far to explain how within Orthodox Christianity, the fundamental basis of our faith is a new start, is a new beginning, is being able to become a new person. We just celebrated the Feast of Pentecost. And we celebrate the Feast of Pentecost, that is the coming of the new covenant. We're not just individually, but collectively. Israel had done all the things the Torah said they weren't supposed to do. And so all the things Deuteronomy chapter 30 said would happen to them had happened to them. And God had promised them that he would begin again. He would sprinkle them with water and wash them and make them clean. He would pour out his Spirit upon them. They would begin again with a renewed covenant, and this time it would be different. We celebrated on Sunday that beginning. And that same beginning is offered to every person who comes to the Orthodox Church. Whoever you were, the day before you were received into the church, whether it's by baptism or chrismation or whoever that was, you don't have to be anymore. It's amazing how freeing that message is to people. You get to break character. You get to stop being that person and be a new person, be the person Christ created you to be. And when you realize that and you internalize that, that's part of what empowers you to fight back against sin. A lot of these sins people are mired in and can't escape, it's because they are hopeless. They don't see a reason to struggle against them. But we offer them transformation, and therefore we offer them a reason. So another thing we learned from Universe 25. Universe 25, again, is mouse utopia. No one wants for anything. Everyone has food, everyone has water, everything they need is delivered to them. What this does is, what it did is, it broke down all the social dynamics that you would normally have in a pack of mice. I don't know if pack is the correct word for a group of mice, but whatever it is. In a group of mice, the social order, the patterns, the roles are related to, this is the one who goes and finds food, right, and brings it back. This is the one who stays back and protects the young from threats, right, and on and on. In a normal functioning mouse community, they have these roles, and each mouse knows its role in the pack, and that gives them comfort. Right? Even if they're not the top mouse, right? Even if they're not on the top, knowing where they are and what their job is and what their role is and how they can contribute, right, gives order to their lives. Okay? Not only were there mice, as we mentioned, who started attacking other mice and being violent, there were mice that literally just laid down and died. That just didn't do anything. Just stopped eating. stop drinking, stop mating. Because there was this purposelessness about their existence. There's a trend right now among Gen Z that seems strange to us who are older, even jaded Gen Xers like me. And that is that for many of them, and I have people in my own family who this applies to, they don't look for careers. They figure out, here's how much I need to exist. I'll get 3 roommates, here's my rent, here's what I need in food. They will work exactly enough to make that much money. And they're done. Right? And you say to them, well, don't you want to go to school for something? Then I'll have debt. Okay. Well, don't you want to have some kind of career, have some kind of fulfilling life? They're like, no, it's just dumb. It's just something you have to do for a paycheck. Right? Because there's no sense of having a role in a broader community. Because for them, work is just something you do for a paycheck. I have certain bills I have to pay so that I have my space in front of my computer to sit in, where all the socializing and everything else takes place. So once I've paid for that, who cares? Who cares? And we wonder why the statistics on deaths of despair keep going up. Right? Because there's no point. That alienation has removed the idea of, I have a role in society. This is my role. This is what I do for my community. This is what I contribute. That's gone. It's all been whittled down to just this personal, transactional, I need a certain amount of money. I have to do stuff I don't want to do to get it, so I'll do exactly that much. And then veg. Right? Now, if the community at their local Orthodox church is functioning as a community, we have an answer to this too. We have an answer to this too. Because if we're functioning as a community, then that means, as St. Paul taught us, if we're the body of Christ is made up of a lot of body parts, right? And some of them are more noble than others, maybe, right, in people's estimation. But regardless of whether you're one of the more noble and visible body parts or less so, you should have a role. Maybe that role is just, I'm the guy who takes the trash out to the dumpster after coffee hour. Maybe it's, I'm the person who goes to coffee hour and sits with the person nobody else is sitting with. I'm the person who goes and introduces myself and welcomes all the visitors. I'm the person who goes and serves at altar. I'm the person who sings in the choir. I'm the person, right? Each person can have a way that they're contributing, that they're pointing to and can take dignity in. And if you're really functioning as a community, it can go even further than that because it can extend past the local church community proper. For example, you can start helping find some of those young guys jobs. The older guys who have the business connections and know people. And then that job is different. This isn't just something I found to pay these bills I have to pay. This is the job that Mr. So-and-so at church helped me get. The work I do here, I want to make him proud because it reflects on him and I love him. And he did this for me because he loves me. And that is unbelievably transformational because now you've taken something, it's now not a relationship between them and an object, it's a relationship between them and a person now. Right? And this is a solution that I think, honestly, we now uniquely have to offer. Because at the church where they're trying to monetize the people, they're not offering that, right? Churches, evangelical churches have become increasingly just sort of vendors or venues, right? You go there, you have your experience, you buy your coffee, you buy, they sell you several things, and then you go home. You go there by yourself, you go home by yourself, it's like going to a movie theater or going to a concert, right? And even a lot of Roman Catholic churches are this way now. I'm in a 70% Roman Catholic area, and a lot of it is, they talk to each other. They know which parish has the shortest mass. Oh, they get it done in 45 minutes over there. You could do your Sunday obligation. They go there, they get their sacrament, they leave. Don't talk to anybody, don't. Right. It would be good if some others had community, but we're about the last ones left that really do, if we do. Hopefully we do. So the third thing, we're done with the mice now. But I'm going to talk about another sociology book. There's a very important book. Of the books I've mentioned, if you want to read one, this is the one I would read, called The Culture of Narcissism by Christopher Lasch, which is talking about our culture and how all of it has basically been reoriented to be about the self. And so this is sort of the reflection of the problem of alienation. If I no longer have relationships with others, then I can't please objects, so I will try to please myself. And you can see places, this is kind of a devolution. If you look at advertising from the 1950s and 60s, it starts to change in the 60s, but early advertising was, here is how this product will make your life better. Here is how it will be useful to you. I used to spend hours vacuuming the floor, but now with the new Wonder Vacuum, I can do it in half that time. Right? This is going to be useful to you. This is going to help you. This is going to make your life better. But the shift happens, and now advertising is about, if you have this, here is what other people will think about you. You will be the envy of all of your friends. And so even consuming things becomes about making this statement about yourself. Many of you remember from about 15 years ago the chicken wars, where you bought your chicken sandwich said where you stand politically. Right? Don't let anyone catch you at Burger King if you're supposed to be a Chick-fil-A person, right? Right? But it's a chicken sandwich, right? But no, you're making a statement. And everyone has now carefully curated social media profiles that are not aimed at honesty. No one has a profile picture that is aimed at honesty, right? No one says, this is a really accurate representation of what I look like, I'm going to use that. Right? It's not what happens. And we curate it to give the impression, this is what I want people to think my life is like. Because maybe if they think my life is like that, I'll start to believe it. Maybe if they see me that way, it'll reflect back at me. But the focus is always the self. And what Christopher Lasch does in his book is he contrasts this with the way people lived historically and the way people still live in traditional cultures today, which is that they would see their life as a thread, this is his phrase, a thread stretched between their parents and their children. And so their life was about receiving from their parents, living that out, burying their parents, and then passing that on to their children, who would then repeat that process. And so there was this generational thread going back through the generations, going forward through time, and their life was a piece. It was a leg in the relay race. But you could see how that's incompatible with a focus on me right now. Because that thread is focused at either the past or the future. Not at what might make me happy in the present, but probably won't. This is another area where I think uniquely Orthodox Christianity has something to contribute. Because the core of our understanding of Holy Tradition is that it is the life of the Holy Spirit in the church. But the life of the Holy Spirit in the church is lived out through the members of the church, through the people who are in the church. And that life is something that I receive from my fathers and mothers in the faith, and that then I seek to pass down to my spiritual children, right, to the next generation. That's a fundamentally different view of religion than the commoditized version, which is trying to sell me something for my right now, trying to be relevant to my life right now. It is me taking from the previous generation, receiving, internalizing that, living it out, and then passing it on. And anyone who comes into the Orthodox Church is adopted into that family line. Okay. We sing, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, the God of our fathers." Not the God of Jewish people's fathers. Not the God of Greek people's fathers. Right? Our fathers. Because St. Paul says, I'm Abraham's seed. I'm his descendant. Right. We are all in the Orthodox Church St. John Chrysostom's descendants, even though he didn't have children biologically. Right. You become a part of that family line. At whatever point you come into the church, you begin to receive, and you still have that same duty to pass on, but that makes you a part of something that is generational, that is bigger than yourself, that will endure long after you're gone. And that reconnects you to a whole previous generation of people and the next generation of people. So those are the three unique things I think we have to offer in response to this alienation that I was asked about. But I can't conclude without pointing out that there are threats to this. Because the same forces that went to work, cultural, societal, etc., that went to work on Protestantism in the United States, which is a far cry from the First Great Awakening and Puritanism, right? And that went to work on Roman Catholicism in the United States, that is a far cry from what the first Bishop of Baltimore was practicing, right, are also going to work now on the Orthodox Church. Those same factors, those same influences. Now, I believe we have the advantage of having the promise from Christ that as his church, the world will not prevail against us, but that doesn't mean we don't have to be vigilant, right, and that we don't have to work, and that we don't have to make sure that our churches remain a place that offers these answers. One way in which that can go awry is that we cannot really offer people a new start. This can happen a bunch of ways. One of them is we decide there are certain kinds of people who we don't want to come and join our church. My friend, Father Paul Abernathy, whose church is not far from here, was once asked if there were racists in the Orthodox Church. And he said, I hope so. I hope all the racists come to the Orthodox Church because this is the place where they'll find healing. Okay. But you can open up pretty much any social media and you will find a lot of people who are members of the Orthodox Church, they're telling you about the other group of people who they are opposed to politically, whose behavior they don't like, whatever. Some of them are racists, right? Whoever this group is they don't like, they don't want them to become part of the Orthodox Church. They don't want to offer them that new start. Because they've inherited this sense of unyielding justice, right? Unyielding accountability that never forgets toward everyone. It takes work in our parishes to make sure that we're always offering that new start to anybody who walks in the door. No matter how far gone they look, no matter what they look like, smell like, where they came from, what bad politics they have, left or right. This is the place where you come to make a new beginning. But also, this is the place you come to make a new beginning. This is not the place you come and keep all of those things, right, unrepentant, and subject the community to them. Right? There's a careful balance there. Right? There's a careful balance there. Another threat in the area of having clearly defined roles, right, in the church, and the gift that that is to people in terms of a sense of meaning and being valuable is, on one side, not a lot of folks seem to listen to St. Paul when he says, not many of you should presume to be teachers. If you're looking for volunteers to teach Sunday school, yes, but otherwise, no. Right? We have inquirers who presume to be online teachers. We have right, all kinds of people who want to be teachers, right? Who want that particular role. And we have to remember what St. Paul said. Not all of you are teachers, right? Not all of you prophesy, not all of you, right? That we don't get to come into the church and pick the role that we think has the prestige, that we think, like Christopher Lash, we think will get people to look at us in a certain way and respect us in a certain way and feed our narcissism in a certain way, right? But we come and we offer the talents and the gifts that God has given us in service of the church, right? The other threat, as I already kind of mentioned, on the other side, is that we don't actually give people a role. This can happen in a bunch of ways. All the roles are taken, right? Just like the pews on Sunday, right? They get claimed by some family in perpetuity, right? This role has been claimed forever by this person or that person or the other person, and there isn't a place for the new person to fit in. There isn't a way for them to come into the community and offer what they have to offer and receive what they need to receive. That's not there. It's not available for them. There's no place to lock in. And it takes work to prevent both of those sides, right? To really offer what we have to offer. And then finally, you're probably predicting this, the third threat has to do with our understanding of tradition. On one side, you have the threat of people not actually wanting to appropriate from the previous generation. Whether they show up thinking they have it all figured out already. Usually that's because they've totally intellectualized it, and it's not about living a life, it's about a certain body of knowledge that they have contained in their head. Right? Or that they've judged it wanting, or that they just have the sense that I decide for myself what to do and what to think and what to believe. And that's a break. Then they don't become they don't become connected to their fathers and their grandfathers in the faith. Right? And of course, there's the threat on the other side. Right? There's the threat of approaching the church in such a way that's all about me receiving and not about me giving, not about me passing on to the next generation. That's part of how we end up with all the roles being claimed, right? It's because, no, I am the one who chants this hymn. Maybe someday when I'm dead, my designated successor can do it, right? But not you, right? Not wanting to pass things on. Not wanting to help the next generation get to where they need to be, right? Receiving the baton and then not passing it on. But so I think if we have the kind of vigilance we need to guard against these things, as I said, the Orthodox Church is uniquely positioned to offer these things to an entire culture that desperately needs them, desperately wants them. Mostly doesn't think they're available or exist. They just honestly don't know that there's an opportunity to answer these deep longings that they have. We stay vigilant. We make our communities places where they can find these things, whether they're coming from some other church upbringing or something where they're not finding these things, from nothing at all, right? From nothing at all, increasingly. They'll find them in the Orthodox Church. And when they come into our churches and experience these things, you don't have to have a bunch of theological arguments with them, right? And explain this and that. They'll connect to it and they'll want it. And they'll be like, okay, I have to kiss pictures? Cool, I'll kiss pictures. Right? I have to say, Most Holy Theotokos, save us. I won't worry about it. I'll say it. Okay, right. Like whatever we have to teach them, whatever we have to give, they'll take because they want this so desperately. Right? And that has to be at the core of what we mean when we say come and see. I think the whole come and see thing got watered down. I think it was, oh, the liturgy is so beautiful and the chanting's so beautiful. Everyone will just want to. And they go back to, we didn't know if we were on earth or in heaven. Well, I got to be honest with you, my parish in South Louisiana is not the Hagia Sophia. Choir has some off days, right? I can't carry a tune in a bucket. So, no one's going to be enraptured by the music in the Divine Liturgy, right? If they find it beautiful, it's going to be the content. It's going to be what's said. It's going to be Christ himself that they find beautiful. Okay? And so the goal is not just that external beauty to draw them. The come and see is the come and see Christ. And they're going to see Christ in us as people and in us as a community. Right? And that's the place where that external life becoming healthy and fulfilling and directed is going to allow their internal life to come into line and allow for repentance and the transformation that they're looking for. So that's my talk.
Questions?
Bet you didn't think I was going to bring up mouse habitats, did you? Yes, Father.
As a fellow Gen Xer in college in the early 90s, and my undergrad was in communication theory. And we studied the kind of coalescence of marketing, advertising, and propaganda. And especially focused on Ed Bernays and how the same way he sold bacon was then borrowed by Goebbels in Nazi Germany for propaganda, all these sorts of things, right? And one of the things that Ed Bernays recognized was the American, one of the themes in America is the rugged individualist. This is another thing you can commodify, right? You can market that. Things that appeal to the American as the individual.
Yeah. Smoke Marlboros and you'll be the Marlboro man. Yeah, yeah.
You see that kind of reaching its kind of its highest point, in the 70s and the 80s and so forth. And it's probably where we're at now, where that's what we're really appealing to is everyone's desire to be the individual, desire to, and it's really isolationism, but commodified as you will have a better life if you're this individual. But the question I have is it's kind of twofold. Is number one, is rugged individualism an intrinsic part of American culture? And if it is, if it's part of the American spirit, is there a way that it can be integrated into American Orthodox culture that it's not isolationist, but rather can be somehow brought into the idea of community, which is, I think, intrinsic to Orthodoxy?
Yeah. Yeah, so to some extent, the rugged individualist thing has always been kind of a lie. Somebody presented on Thoreau. I don't know if you're here, but you realize he borrowed an axe. That was like the first thing he did when he went out to Walden Pond. So his rugged individualism was kind of supported by a little help from other people. So there's a certain, but that just makes it more mythic, right? It gives it that place in people's minds. I think, so the problem with individualism is that it inverts what identity actually is. So for most of human history, your identity was about your relationships with other people. So my identity is, I am my wife's husband, I am my parents' son, right? I'm these people's son, I am this person's husband. I am, maybe these people's father. This is my job. This is the role I have in the community, right? This is the church I go to, right? All of these things that are external to me. And that got inverted, where it's kind of this adolescent thing. Normally kids, they grow up and that's their identity, and then they become teenagers. It's like, no, I'm not like my parents. I'm not like right? And so identity becomes all the things that make me different or separate me or distinguish me from my parents, my community, my, right? Everything. I'm not my job. I'm not. But when you take all those things away, you're left with a void. There's nothing really there because it's just a negation. You've made your identity just a negation of everything outside of yourself. Right? That's ultimately the problem with individualism. Normally, teenagers, when they become adults, they sort of go back to the way they were when they were kids, and they're like, no, I'm this person's husband, and this person, right? And they go back to understanding themselves in terms of other people. So that's the problem with individualism. I think the ruggedness maybe is more incorporatable, right? So, for example, and I don't know how much of this is hagiography, right? But the story I'm told about Archbishop Dmitri, right, is that he is a very young man, went to Dallas where there was no Orthodox church for miles around, right, and began from nothing, right, and built, right, the Diocese of the South, right? And of course, that's a very shortened and summary version, right? But there's something of the American frontier spirit there, right? I'm going to go where there is no church, and I'm going to plant a church there. And I'm going to bring the gospel there. I'm going to bring Christ there to these people who don't have him and don't know him, right, and haven't seen him. I think that element of that American, right, rugged individualism, I think that can find a place in the Orthodox Church. We need more people like that. We need a lot more people like that. I'm not just talking about the clergy shortage. Right? But we need people who are willing to, let's be honest, right? What a lot of us have been doing for a lot of years is converting middle-class white people to Orthodoxy of a high education level. We need people who are going to go into other communities and poor communities, right? And go places where we haven't gone. And extremely wealthy communities. We haven't done a lot there either successfully, right? To get out of just that mold. It's not that it's bad. Everyone needs Christ. Middle-class white people too, right? But, right? But not only middle-class white people, right? And again, that ruggedness, you got to be willing to get your hands a little dirty. Because some of the people you start bringing to church are going to be living with people they have 3 kids with and they're not married. Right? And then when, you hear in a catechesis curriculum that like, oh, if they're doing that, you got to tell the father he's got to move out. It's like, really? He's got to abandon his children if he wants to join the church? What if the mom can't pay the rent without him? And you got to get into some messy situations that may require you to exercise a little economia, right? In these situations, right? So for example, I've had a similar situation. I told them to go get civilly married. I can't marry them. They're not Orthodox. Right? And there are people who, if this gets posted online, will be, Father Stephen told someone to get married outside the church. Right? Well, how am I going to get them into the church? And so if some of that ruggedness is a little willingness to get our hands dirty and deal with real messy situations. And that's increasing. We're not going to find increasingly a lot of like nice people like us who just happen to be Methodists instead of Orthodox, right? A lot younger generations, and the younger you go, it's more and more messy and more weird. Right? But they need Christ, and we need people who are able to go in there, maintain their integrity, but do what needs to be done, right, at the same time. So I think that's a way we can incorporate some of that too.
Miami is now 7% Latino and Afro-Caribbean, and I'm definitely not the right guy to minister to them, but I'm the guy that God sent them.
Yeah.
This is more anecdotal evidence to support what you were talking about with finding people jobs. So my wife is from a parish that she was one of probably 30 young children, a very vibrant parish that had all the programs, was kind of hailed as one of these exemplary OCA parishes in that regard, especially within the diocese. When she looks back at all of those children, her friends that she grew up with, very few of them are still in the church. And she identifies that the ones who stayed in the church were the ones that had roles. That she unfortunately went to a parish where a lot of people were not willing, the old guard, if you will, were not willing to hand the baton off. And it's actually the ones who went to other parishes where those batons were handed down to them that are still in the church. She went off and ended up working for the diocese as kind of the youth kind of coordinator amongst the, and OCF liaison and things like that. That kept her in the church. And the others that she can identify, it's the ones who were given jobs. Some of them in the parish, but most of them are people who moved somewhere for college, went to a parish where they were given a job. And in her home parish, where it was like, the adults are like, we got this, you kids, don't worry about it. Those kids did not stay in the church. Right? It's that they were given those roles, they were given the baton, they were given some responsibility, they were given a sense of meaning within the life of the church. It's those ones that stayed, and the ones who had everything handed to them in the life of the church that was beautiful and glorious and all these things that we can hold as a wonderful, beautiful thing, they're not there anymore. And just, again, anecdotal evidence within the life of the church to support what you're saying.
Yeah, but I think lots of people have seen that, right? And it's, and I've seen it with individual people, right, who have gone from being very stressed out and anxious and a problem in the community to when they're given a role and treated with respect for that role and feel appreciated for that contribution, even if it's not the big, high prestige one, all of a sudden they become a real helpful, beloved part of the community. All that stress goes away and all of that, right? Because they have that now.
It's just a matter of creativity, right? Because with the influx of the catechumens, you got to almost make up roles. It's very creative. You have several hundred people signing every single one. It can be doable, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it is, and this is increasingly hard as we get the influx, right? Just getting to know everybody. And I don't mean just memorize their name, right? That could even be hard depending on how many people you've got coming in. I mean, All Saints in North Carolina, they got like 100 people at a time. It's crazy, right? I don't know how I would do that, right, as a priest. But beyond their name, who are they? What do they do? What are their talents, right? Like it's been amazing how much our physical church has turned around in our parish just because I found out, oh, this guy can do a little plumbing. This guy could do a little electrical. This guy could do, and just letting them do that. When there's a problem, instead of calling somebody and asking for money, you go to that person and say, hey, can you take a look at, and maybe they could fix it, maybe they can't, but they can at least assess it, right? And then they feel valued and they feel valuable. Finding those things out and creating groups, like having a men's group, right? And having a women's group that isn't just the ladies' society who gets assigned to cook things, but where the women are actually fellowshipping with each other, forming friendships and relationships, learning the faith, right? Passing it on to younger women, right? Passing the Orthodox life on to, right? Actually having that functioning, right? Once you have that kind of group, there's all kinds of roles within that, right? For the older women and the younger women, right? And men's groups, right? All these different groups. One thing, and so this is a product of the influx. So this is just something that I've seen, is that when you have this big influx of new people, you end up with like lots of them having the same sponsors, right? Because you have a smaller group of people who were there before and this big influx. And so several of those older people in my parish will have all of their godchildren over to their house every couple of months. And they really now have this idea that they're like god brothers or god sisters, right? Like they really do, right? They get that family dynamic becomes real for them, right? Beyond just, oh, I had to pick somebody to list as my sponsor. But no, this is, right, a part of our life. So there's lots of little community building things that don't take a ton of work. In fact, if you suggest that to some of those people who are sponsoring a lot of older people would love to do that. They're like, that's a great idea, right? Like, have everybody out and barbecue or something, It doesn't have to be anything advanced. So, and that one depends on the influx, right? The fact that you've got one guy who's got, 12, 23-year-old godsons, who can have them all over to the house,
Right now it's empowering people to do in-reach. So for
Yeah.
example, they'll come to me and say, so-and-so got robbed of all of her clothes, right? This is a
Yeah.
real thing. And so before it'd be, okay, Father, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Now it's like, I want to get a structure over here. You have money, you get a pool, if you need to use it, get other people.
Yeah.
Or you guys take care of it. You get them out.
You give them something to eat, right? Yeah.
Almost give
Yeah.
them creativity, the opportunity to be creative even.
Yeah.
Of how to help people within the church community.
Yeah. The proudest day I had as a priest, hopefully not in the sinful pride sense, but maybe it's me we're talking about, was I found out a month later that one of my parishioners had gotten evicted from an apartment and another family in the church had taken them in. No one even bothered to contact me. It was just immediate. Right? And that's why I'm proud of it, because I didn't do anything. Right? I'm proud of them. Right? But yeah, so but like with the godsons thing, now it's not just, oh yeah, all these guys listed me as their sponsor, but he's now the godfather, right? He's now, I'm going to be showing these guys these things, and they now have this relationship with him and with each other that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
I was just going to say, going back to the idea of rugged individualism, as someone who was an alien until 2002, when we moved here, coming from Canada, one of the things that my husband and I both remarked on was, and I know this is a stereotype, but the can-do or optimistic attitude of Americans, even over against what we experienced in Canada as your closest neighbors. The question when somebody comes up with an idea in Canada is, how can we do this? This has never been done before. Are you sure this is a good idea? What is this going to cost? All the barriers come up. Whereas here, idea, they're much more likely to find somebody else who thinks it's a good idea and run with it. That's just the, kind of a
There's an
characteristic.
optimism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does, link, doesn't it, with the scriptures. You know, you give them something to eat, or the resurrection, God can do all things. I mean, it's not that we want to be sentimental or brash or silly about it, but there is a characteristic, an American characteristic that does here jive with the optimism of the gospel, and I think it's something that could be very well used, especially in this time of influx.
Yeah. Yeah. And
You
that,
have to see it when you come outside, it's just not the same in Canada. It's not.
yeah, one of the first things I said to my parish council when I got to Lafayette was, I want to hear your ideas, I don't want to hear your opinions. Right? I said, I don't care about your opinions. Everybody has opinions, whatever. I said, but if you have ideas, I want you to bring ideas here. And it really transformed the way the parish council works. When that's the view. When it's like, hey, I had an idea, we could do this, right? The whole spirit of the thing changes. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I think this actually ties in with something you mentioned briefly earlier on about like Walmart. It's hard for us to have a relationship with Walmart.
Yeah.
But mega corporation, sure.
Yeah. I worked there once and I didn't have a relationship with them. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that Walmart's one of those interesting companies, at least my superstore in, Alabama, north central Alabama, where they responded to the COVID lockdowns by providing a couple of different solutions for people. One is pick up your order. The other is we'll deliver your order.
Yeah.
And what I've found is, as I've matured a little bit, and those kinds of services really help at times, is they've got a really crack team of customer service planners, organizers, trainers that are training cheerful, engaged people of all age groups. It doesn't matter what day of the week. It might be, a kid. It might be, someone maybe a couple of years younger than me is all. But they're really fully on board with what they're doing, and they're friendly, and they're efficient, and they know they're helping. And I always make sure to give positive feedback. Tell the manager, this is working. This really helps me, and feed that back up the pipeline so they get that kind of feedback. And so there is the opportunity to have relationships, if not with the mega corporation,
With the people.
that are
Yeah,
there.
the actual humans. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
yeah.
actually does lead to opportunities then to witness, which is kind of everyone knows Steve Robinson probably in here. That's a very Steve Robinson kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Bruce Coburn has that in his songs, the neighbor screaming down the hall, our orders say to love them all, so it's like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter about all the static, but if we can be functionally engaged, and these examples that corporations are even setting,
Yeah.
let's see that.
There is the opportunity for us to treat those humans as human.
Yeah.
And in the South, there's more of that. That's my experience when I was at St. Ticon's of like upstate New York and Northeast Pennsylvania, less so maybe. But at least less than the South, right? But yeah, that is, there's, even if you're having your groceries delivered, there's checking the box, no, leave it at the door, I don't want to talk to a person, right? Or actually talking to the human who shows up at your door, right? And if you do that regularly, I don't think we're ever going to get back to, okay, I know the guy who works at the corner store and so-and-so's kid is bagging groceries, right? I don't think we're headed back there in most major cities, but you can get a little, right? You can at least, yeah.
One point about the roles that you
Yeah.
mentioned, that I find insightful, going to Walmart. Walmart considered rewarding employees to deliver when they go back home. So they said, you're going back home, there are a couple of deliveries your way. So they were exploring how to make it efficient deliveries by giving complementary roles to their own people, and they become part of their own thing. So, but which kind of means that being creative in finding roles and assigning roles in our communities is a nice thing. Could be a small thing, but asking someone in the face, can you help this man, or when you come back next time, please, whatever, is a way of making the community one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, this is also not a question, but now I want to.
Okay. No.
So our parish has been getting a lot of new people, everyone else, and my wife and I will try to invite them over. Once a month is kind of an ideal. We want more like once every other month, something like that. Come over on a Sunday night, we'll get something together. But like, we got 4 kids. Our house is like always a mess. It's like, but what we do is we just say, oh, hey, could you bring this? And could you do that? And it's suddenly like, not only is it this community space, but they're all contributing. Like, it's a great time. We have good food, and we have, we talk and whatever. And the people in your parishes who might think to themselves, like, gosh, I would love to do that, but I'm just, so stressed out, and we got to do the bedtime with the kids and whatever. Maybe recasting it as, no, plan it. Hey, if you tell people, or if you tell yourself we're having people over, you will. So that does help, right?
Yeah.
It helps motivate you, but also like saying, no. Like, she loves kids. She can play with the kids at bedtime while you're working in the kitchen. Whatever, and just kind of think in terms of, it's not about, because we're not this kind of consumerist model. It's not about, what are we offering these people? We need to look at them with dignity, that they have something to offer us, just as much as we have something to offer them. And that should start from the beginning, even in very, very small ways, like, hey, could you bring some LaCroix or whatever, to our gathering, so we have some bubbly water to drink. But they do, and and they're usually, even more generous than we expect. It's just, hey, we forgot this, and like, oh, you know what, I got a cheese platter, and I got whatever, and it's this kind of informal exchange of gifts.
Yeah.
Is really fundamental to
Yeah.
being an authentic community,
And-
it can incorporate the role aspect as well.
And-
It's very interesting.
Yeah. And this is in no way a rebuke, but I'm noticing the first thing you said, right? The apologizing for your house and the kids, right? Like, guess what every other family's house looks like in your parish, right? But there's sort of a very light touch of that narcissism, right? Of the like, what are they going to think of me? When I was a kid in the Dutch Reformed Church, you're from Grand Rapids, right? Yeah, you're from the New Jerusalem. Right? They had a tradition. They didn't do house blessings like we do, but the pastor and one of the elders would come and visit each family in their home once a year. And it was the fakest day of the year at my house, right? My dad would be wearing a suit. My mom would be in this dress. Me and my sister would be like arrayed at their feet singing a psalm, like as the pastor walked in, right? Like, and I don't know who we thought we were fooling. Like the pastor was not thinking that's how we lived, right? But we all have this thing where it's like, and we all do it to each other, because if you go to someone else, they're going to be thinking the same thing, right? Oh, we need to pretend that our house is always perfectly clean, even though we have 4 children. You're not fooling anyone. Everyone knows. Just be honest with each other, right? Like, yeah.
Is like, it has helped the house be cleaner.
Well, that's true. If you need it as a motivator, right? Like that's.
Simplify, like, why don't we do meals anymore? I haven't been so well the last 2 years. We do dessert. Come at 7 o'clock for dessert.
Yeah, we always
talk.
Yeah.
Seven,
Yeah.
so we get to
Dessert
that.
and you simplify it. It's not a stress on me. They don't feel they have to reciprocate by having us back for a meal. It works really well.
Yeah.
If I may be so bold, we do see Jesus following this pattern in his meeting with Fotini at the well. That he and his disciples arrived at that particular well, and no one in the group had a bucket. The fact that he sent the disciples into the city, probably with the buckets, means that he put himself in a position where when Fotini shows up, he is asking her for something that he needs. So perhaps another way that we might approach this is asking somebody over to help you clean the house is, in a sense, as you've talked about, it is giving them a role, and it is
showing a certain vulnerability that says, I need your help. Will you share this with me? And there is an integration that comes from that. So you don't necessarily need to do something for them. There may be a ministry also in asking these people to do something for you.
Yeah. Saint Fotini is also a good example of someone who is living in a community bearing her shame, right? And then gets this new start. And part of that new start is a new role in the community. She's the one who goes and witnesses, right, about Christ, right, to the community, totally reshaping her role.
I just want to say, sometimes it's culturally based. Like, so in Eastern European, particularly Balkan Eastern European culture, like the whole process of hospitality, of the idea that you take the time to clean up everything, make everything perfect for that guest to come into this environment is part of an act of love. Right? Hospitality is very deep and complex, and it isn't like, oh, just come into my dirty house.
Yeah.
All the things you do in preparation are part of your act of love and sacrifice for this family to come into your home and experience, some peace and frivolity, whatever, while you're there. So sometimes it's cultural. I think that's a difference. Maybe, some people think like, oh, just see me how I am. But there's in some Orthodox places, that whole ritual of getting ready is part of an act of love.
Yes, sir.
There's a unique feature of hospitality to think about in terms of visiting the sick. If they're ill, they're not going to be able to fix their apartment or house up. They're already oftentimes very desperate situation. As a physician, halfway through my career, I first finally got experiences doing home visits, which was a revelation, because I always had patients come to see me under controlled circumstances in a sterile hospital environment or clinic, and where I was in control. And to go into an environment where everything is unexpected, or you're not sure what you're dealing with, it's quite a revelation. I remember the very first time, before I was even thinking about doing this kind of training, I shadowed a friend who was doing hospice work in inner city Detroit. We visited an African-American woman who had advanced cancer. Walked in, and the first thing we saw was a black Jesus on the wall. And that was a really important revelation for me. And so the whole issue of encounter, of course, that was emblematic. I was also meeting Jesus in this person. And so I think that if we can put it in that kind of a context, so we're looking at the face of Jesus, maybe not necessarily the dirt on the floor, every encounter we have is a small theophany.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And the first part of what you said also points to how important it is for a real sense of community and relationships between people that we do things outside of the church building. Right? If we really want to come and know each other, because everyone comes to church dressed nice, everything's fine, everything's good, I'm a good Christian person, right? It's curated. The way they show up at the doctor's office, they get all fixed up, and right. And you don't get a full sense of the reality of anybody's life. And people don't get a sense of the reality of each other's life until they're in each other's spaces, right, and in other spaces together.
There is no place where the Holy Spirit is not.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's true. And there are gatherings of people in my parish that I deliberately don't attend for that reason. Because I know that if the priest is there, that's going to change how people act and what they talk about and how they relate. So a lot of times I will be there, but there are times where I say, you know what, I think it's better that they not worry about me being there.
What do you think is the role or potential role for the diaconate? I mean, again, as a layperson, oftentimes in many experiences I've had, it seems like they're mainly involved in service at the altar, but there's not this, where I have seen it, like in Romania or other older countries, where there was an archdeacon or who was in charge of the
Yeah.
diocese, for example. So I just wonder what your
I-
thoughts
I-
about that are at a parish level.
I think one of the good results of the clergy shortage is going to be the restoration of that. I think just functionally, priests are going to have to start delegating things more to the deacons, which will reinvigorate diaconal ministry. And a lot of our deacons, because they have their own jobs in the community, right, they're kind of a bridge between clergy and laity, right? They kind of are both, right, to a certain extent, right, in a way that, I mean, a bivocational priest is, but that's got its own challenge, right? But almost all of our deacons are that way, right, unless they're retired. And so I think that in and of itself opens up a lot of ministry opportunities, right, in serving as that bridge. Yes, sir.
Might it also be an opportunity to encourage unordained lay people to step up into those,
Yes.
diaconal roles, diaconia service, right? I mean, one of the reasons I've kind of theorized that the order of the diaconess fell away is that as the church grew, lay women began to step up into those roles anyway. You don't need to be ordained to go visit the sick.
Right. No, and that should be encouraged. Yeah, so fundamentally, I have enough priest stuff to do. Right? I'm engaged in enough priestcraft that right, I don't need to be doing things that you don't need to be ordained to do. Right? That will overload my plate very quickly. Right? And so, yeah, that's where lay people need to step up. But the same is true of the diaconate, right? There are things that, you can visit the sick, you can't bring them the Eucharist. A deacon can, right? You being a layperson, right? So yeah, there's a lot of visiting. And let me put in a word. This is a word that's coming from my father. This is part of my thread going back. One of the things my dad did his whole life, and that he impressed on me, was that every time a person dies, there's a whole world, a whole life of experiences and memories and things they've learned that in most cases kind of vanishes, at least from here, right? From our world and our knowledge. And he used to go and just spend time with older, retired people who are sitting there with not a lot to do. He'd just go visit and sit and listen to their stories about their life and their experiences and those things, and he would pass those on, right? He sort of became the person who received those, right, to pass them on. And that is a ministry that any layperson can do who's looking for something, right? Because every one of our parishes has people in that category who would just love someone who would just listen to them talk. All kinds of people in our parishes pay people to listen to them talk. Right? How absurd is that? Right? And receive those things and treasure those things and be able to pass them on. Right? So I learned from my dad, from talking to those people, I learned all kinds of stories about the Dutch resistance in World War II. Because these old Dutch guys who were part of the Dutch resistance told him these stories. Now I've got them, right? And I've tried to, people I know, pass them on, right? But it's wonderful stuff, right? Wonderful stuff, and a great kind of ministry that literally anyone can do. There are no prerequisites, right, of any kind, other than being able to get to a place where a person is. Yes, sir.
When Jerome returned the axe, he made sure it was sharper than it was.
So see, he wanted to have a good relationship with the person he borrowed the axe from. Yes, sir.
One thing that, when DeBerry talks about loving your neighbor, and he says that, and using the words of Christ, he says, but there's something about loving your neighbor that requires that you need to have some skills that you can use for your neighbor. He says, it's no good to say you love your neighbor if you don't know how to repair his fence. And I think maybe that could also be a motivating factor for some people who are relatively unmotivated. To say, if you don't need this skill, if you don't need the skill for yourself, maybe you can use it on behalf of someone else.
Yeah. There's someone in the parish who needs their lawn mowed or their trash taken out, right? Or, yeah. And I always try to tell people, love is not a feeling, love is a set of actions that you take. Whether we're talking about loving God, right? Christ says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. That's way scarier than I think most people realize. Because that means the inverse is true. It means if you don't keep his commandments, you don't love him. That's super frightening, right? It says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandment. You will do something, right? And if I tell my wife every morning that I love her, but my actions don't reflect that at all, she won't believe me. And it won't have any value. So the same thing is true. Loving my neighbor, loving my fellow parishioner means doing things, right? Not just saying that or exchanging the kiss of peace, but actually doing that.